call from Wani here, and today I am joined by a gentleman who is not only renowned for being a stellar drummer, but who is also a real treat to watch performing live. I am of course stoked to be here with Arejay Hale of Halestorm. Arejay, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today, man.
Oh, no problem, man. Thank you so much for having me.
My sincere pleasure. So, the record has been doing the rounds for a few weeks now, and to say that it has generated a lot of curiosity and attention would be one hell of an understatement. So, as we're here in its first month, how has the response to Vicious been for you so far, Arejay?
You know, it's been surprisingly positive. I mean, every time you go in to make a record, you kind of never know what the reaction is going to be. So, I was very glad to see that people are liking the new stuff. We've been kind of putting a pretty fair amount of new songs in our sets, in our live sets on this tour, and we were a bit worried that maybe it was too much unfamiliar material and people want to hear the old songs. But so far, everyone's been singing along to the new songs. They've been really digging it. So, yeah, I think that's all a pretty positive sign.
Now, one of the things I love about the record as well is while working on it with Nick, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you really didn't practice the cut, copy and paste method that has very much become the norm when making contemporary records. You know, every part is performed and no two takes sound the same. And I pick up on that especially in cases such as Lizzie's performance and in your powerhouse delivery also. And I was wondering, what was it that saw you guys taking this more organic approach to recording Vicious?
Oh, hey, I appreciate the kind words, man. Thanks very much. I mean, you pretty much nailed it right there. The way that you just described it, like we really wanted to kind of, bring kind of a quote unquote powerhouse feel and approach to the record. And I feel like a lot of bands in our genre are starting to branch out and explore new territories. So for us, we felt like the wisest choice and the wisest direction to go in would be to kind of go back to our roots and kind of try to recreate the energy and intensity that we try to bring to our live show. Trying to capture that on tape has always been a huge challenge for us. Like, for some reason, it's really difficult to have that same energy and that same aggression on record. So we felt like it was a pretty wise choice going with a producer that was, not only so brilliant in making records with that organic feel and that really good energy. He did the Foo Fighters and Queens of the Stone Age and Mastodon and Rush and like just so many amazing records. So we felt very confident that he knew what he was doing, but at the same time, he was also a big fan of our live show. And he was the only producer that had seen us live so many times, where he kind of had a way better idea of how to capture what we do live on record. And we think that with this record, it's probably the closest that we've gotten to finally achieving that.
Well, I absolutely think you achieved it. I think you captured the magic of what you guys did do live and committed it to tape on this record. What was the secret to achieving that? How did you guys do that this time?
Playing in the studio is such a different feeling and it's a completely different animal than performing live. When you're performing live, you've got the energy of the crowd. You've got, you want to go above and beyond. You kind of want to push your limits, when you're playing live. And in the studio, it's a much more kind of sterile environment. You're kind of playing under a microscope, so you're a bit more conscious of trying to get every hit perfect, and trying to get everything right, and trying to play with the proper techniques of playing your instrument in a studio environment. But so there was a certain level of that. Like we had, I had to make sure that every hit was consistent, and that I was, easing up off the cymbals and trying to play like a studio musician. But our producer Nick was in the live room with us while we were tracking the album, and having his energy there, his presence, and also he just has a really good positive vibe, great energy, and also just a big fan and lover of music. So So it was really cool to have him in there, and he would get in my face, and he would encourage me to try to play more like I do live. He wanted to encourage more, even some more showmanship in the studio. He was like, in this part of the set, you're going to stand up and you're going to spin your sticks. I know that's what you want to do, so do it, you know. And that was a great way to. And even he was like, don't even worry about being exactly on the metronome, you know, like, you know, let the song breathe, push and pull like you do live, you know. So every time we did a take like that, it was usually the best take. So. Yeah, for me, it was just having the encouragement and the kind of direction from Nick. You know, just to bear in mind the energy that to bring to a take rather than trying to just play it perfect. And like you said earlier, we tried to do it all in one take. We tried to do as minimal editing and as minimal comping as possible.
You're such a treat to watch. You have this unhinged, almost loose cannon quality to you, which creates a great energy. And I'm curious as to whether this is like a controlled chaos you've worked into your performance, or is there a genuine maniacal element where anything can happen on any given night while watching you?
Oh, you're too kind, man. I appreciate the kind words. Thanks, man.
Of course, dude. It's all the truth. It's all the truth.
I guess I think now more than we used to. I think that we're trying to be a little more conscious of making sure that we play our parts right. It's a little. I think it feels a little less unhinged than it used to be. But now we're just trying to perform the songs that we've written, the parts that we've written. You know, we, especially with this record in the studio, we felt a lot more creative freedom to help to kind of bring more intricate musicianship to the recording. With especially on my end, like with every record that we put out, every producer kind of wanted me to simplify everything and dumb it down so there's, you know, a lot of space and everything, and you know, which is important. I'm totally fine with that. But Nick was a producer that encouraged a lot more creativity with writing different musical parts to the song. So with this, especially with this tour, and especially with the new songs, like we're kind of in the mentality of wanting to play them right, play them correctly, and play the parts right every night. So. So there's still a lot of energy. It's still pretty unhinged, but it's a lot more focused now. Especially now in our career, you know, we're playing bigger rooms. We've got more people coming to the shows. We really want to make sure that we don't have a quote unquote off night. You know, we want to make sure that every show counts. Every show is as good as we can get it, you know.
Of course, man. And look, if you'd be so kind, I'd love to get your thoughts on a topic, well, a couple of topics that fascinate me. Like, obviously there are subgenres within subgenres when it comes to rock and metal, but Halestorm, as far as I'm concerned, are one of the bands keeping the rock and roll element alive and interesting. And a lot of the artists I've spoken with feel there's a strong sense of retromania in our modern culture, including music, that has an addiction to its own past, and we have a lack of forward-thinking musicians, so we're just kind of recycling, and others, of course, are the opposite. So I'd love to get your 2 cents and hear what your take is on this conversation.
Well, my take on it is that, you know, the rock music genre has gotten so generic and so boring and so repetitive. You know, I'm right now. I mean, in the UK and in Europe, like it's still doing pretty well, but in the States, it's just kind of dwindling. And I believe that a big part of it is just that, you know, modern rock, you know, new bands go through the same filters as everybody else. They're using the same samples, they're using the same producers and studio musicians and all that. So, you know, the real creative genres of music were then, you know, like hip hop music or pop music was coming out with way more creative, way more creative stuff, and rock bands were all sounding the same. So, I mean, I think to keep rock cool and relevant, you know, and you know, so the kids, you know, can love it and appreciate it, you really have to go out on a limb and try to come up with something really fresh and original, you know. So that was definitely our goal. I mean, that was definitely my goal with this record, was to try to blend and melt a lot of different elements from different styles of music, and try to make some kind of melting pot. So it's kind of fresh and new and interesting.
Wow.
So, hopefully, and I see it with a lot of newer bands that are want to play rock and roll music, but don't want to sound like everybody else. So I totally agree. I think that the only way to save rock and roll music is to try to take a risk, take a chance.
Well, first of all, I think you achieved that with this record.
Keep it creative.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And second, you touched on something interesting there, because when we talk about the current culture of music and rock and metal specifically, I don't know if your eye happened to catch a couple of recent articles, one stating that musicians only received a mere 12% of the industry's revenue in 2017, and another featuring, Gene Simmons, who said, and I'm paraphrasing, the truth is that new bands don't have a chance. And both articles contain some strong words, but, are they exaggerated or are they harsh truths? My question for you essentially is, the future of rock and metal, are you hopeful or are you anxious for it?
I think it's silly to think that rock music or rock and roll music is going to die, because it never does. It just evolves. If anyone's going to say like rock and roll is dead, it's like, no, rock and roll isn't dead. Just your particular type of rock and roll is dead. Like it's easy for Gene Simmons to say that, because nobody nowadays wants to start up a band and sound just like Kiss. Like maybe 80s hair metal sounding bands are dead, but now it's just evolved and morphed in a different way. And now there's bands like Greta Van Fleet or like Rival Sons, or even in the more alternative genres like Walk the Moon, or like all these bands that kind of branch away from just the generic aggro active rock sound. That's what I feel is kind of going away. But where it dies in one area, it grows in another. So I think that just like any kind of music, it's always going to morph and change. The rock and roll in the '60s didn't sound anything like rock and roll in the '90s. So we're just going to keep on growing and keep evolving, and it's just going to keep on changing. So yeah, who knows what it's going to sound like next. All we can do is, and I encourage this to any new bands or anyone that's wanting to write music and create music, the best way to break the mold and the best way to jumpstart something fresh and new and interesting is to do something that's so honest. I just saw this documentary on Korn. When Korn came out, it was just such a different thing. Like, they weren't trying to follow the radio. They weren't trying to be successful. They just wanted to do what they did, and everybody caught on because they loved how honest and genuine it was. So I think that's where rock and roll will continue to live on. Is the only way you can do it is to just be so blatantly blunt and honest.
We were saying earlier about the band being out on the road and touching base with your fans, and when I've attended Halestorm shows in the past, I've noticed that your demographic is quite diverse in its age range. You have kids front row, and Halestorm is their first show ever, and they're standing next to seasoned veterans who are digging what you're doing themselves. And despite what some think, that that's not necessarily something every band is fortunate to have, but most bands or artists will agree that it can be one of the essential keys to having some real longevity. So my final question for you, Arejay, is why is it, do you think, Halestorm translates across these different generations of music lovers?
Not to repeat myself, but again, I think the secret to success is honesty, and I think people like bands, and I think that people can see through. Sorry, I don't know if I should swear or not.
You're all good. Go ahead, man.
People can see through. I'll just say people can see through BS, or people can see through bullshit, if you want to edit that out. But I think that people are more wise to spotting bullshit than we give them credit for. So, I always encourage that with anyone. I think that the reason that we've been able to capture or I don't know. I don't know the best way to describe it, but I guess the reason that people were kind of drawn to us is because that's kind of always been our MO. Like we've never wanted to fake it. You know, like for us to put a record out, we have to love it completely. You know, we have to be fans of it. You know, so that's why this record took so long, because we weren't going to put it out until we absolutely loved it front to back. You know, so I mean, if you're gonna want to get into the music business, make sure that you do music that you love, because if you're doing music that you think will be, you know, successful, or you're trying to chase the radio, you know, I think that people can see through the fakeness, and I think that people really want to hear something real and genuine, you know. So, I mean, that's kind of always been our MO, and you know, I think it's been working pretty good. And you're right, it is cool to see kids coming to shows and trying and hearing this, you know, very genuine, very raw rock and roll sound, and thinking, wow, this is cool. Like, this is kind of different, you know.
Awesome, man. Well, RJ, look, and
it's funny to think, you know, because like so many bands, you know, are now so used to like having backtracks and to like, you know, fatten up the sound, but we kind of chose to kind of go in the other direction, like go super raw, super honest, and now it's at a point where it's almost more rare to see that, you know. So yeah.
Awesome,
it's working out pretty good, I guess.
Well, man, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Congratulations on the great record. Best of luck with everything in 2018 and beyond, and I can't wait to catch you next month here in Dublin.
Oh, dude, I can't wait. I know. Let's definitely hang out. We'll have to drink a Guinness together.
Oh, absolutely. on me, mate. On me. It's on me.
All right.
I look forward to it, brother.
I love Dublin. I can't wait to get there.
All right, man. Well, I'll keep the Guinness cold. You enjoy your day, and I shall see you in a couple of weeks, my friend.
Yes. All right, looking forward to it, man. See you then.
Likewise, brother. Have a good day. Bye.